Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some evil. This society needs a spectacle.
On A View from the Outside this week being the 25th of June 2022, we ask whether there is anyone, especially among those in authority, who feel distressed and disappointed with events that have unfolded over time and continue to unfold in St Vincent and the Grenadines. The Collins Dictionary states that if someone is distressed, they are upset and worried. And the Cambridge Dictionary states that to be disappointed is to be unhappy because someone or something was not as good as you hoped or expected, or because something did not happen. Those definitions tell us that to be distressed and disappointed is to be, among other things, upset, worried, unhappy, and let down. Just a few days ago, in fact, last Thursday, the 23rd of June 2022, there were two by-elections in the United Kingdom. The ruling Conservative government, under the leadership of Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, held those two seats by substantial majorities prior to the by-elections being called. However, in the by-elections, they lost both seats heavily. Those heavy losses, along with accumulation of other things and scandals about Boris Johnson, including him having narrowly survived a vote of no confidence by his own party, and him being fined by the police for breaking COVID-19 laws which he and his party enforced on the people, caused the chairman of their party, Oliver Dowden, to resign. In his letter of resignation to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, Oliver Dowden said, and I quote, "Yesterday's parliamentary by-elections are the latest in a run of very poor results for our party. Our supporters are distressed and disappointed by recent events, and I share their feelings. We cannot carry on business as usual. Somebody must take responsibility, and I have concluded that in these circumstances, it would not be right for me to remain in office." Unquote. That action to resign by Oliver Dowden, the chairman of the Conservative Party, shows that there are still people who are willing to take a principled stand, especially when they are distressed and disappointed because their great expectations and hopes are dashed. It is the contents of Oliver Dowden's resignation letter and the troubling things which have been unfolding in St Vincent and the Grenadines, which have prompted us here on A View from the Outside to cover this topic today. And we do so by asking members and supporters of the ULP, particularly, whether you are distressed and disappointed by the occurrences in St Vincent and the Grenadines. Of course, we cannot cover every occurrence, but the following is meant to stimulate you into thinking about these things and to hope that you then do what is right. So, here we go. Are you distressed and disappointed by the continuing rise in crime, especially heinous crimes in the country? Especially when everyone was given the grandiose assurance that they will be tough on crime and the causes of crime. Are you distressed and disappointed knowing that Cornelius John was beaten and shot on his own private property, allegedly by those in high office, and up to now, no one has been brought to justice? Have you ever stopped to think that Cornelius John could be you? Had Cornelius John been you, would you not want justice? Would you be satisfied with the grave injustice that has been meted out to Cornelius John? Aren't you distressed and disappointed about that? Aren't you distressed and disappointed knowing that Glenn Jackson's murder still remains unsolved 16 years after he was brutally murdered? Have you forgotten who Glenn Jackson was? Have you forgotten that he was one of the persons credited for getting the ULP into government? Aren't you distressed and disappointed about that? Aren't you distressed and disappointed with the way Edgar Cruikshank, a one-time ardent supporter of the ULP, met his demise? Does that not distress and disappoint you? Aren't you distressed and disappointed about the many sex scandals and rape allegations against those who are meant to set the standards and lead the country? Aren't you distressed and disappointed when you see how Yogi Farrell has been destroyed and cast aside? Does it not bother you that Yogi Farrell could have been you, your own daughter, or someone close to you? Does that not distress and disappoint you? Aren't you distressed and disappointed when you, your children, and others you know are made to surrender their dignity for the promise of a job or the promise of a scholarship or to get basic living expenses merely to survive? Aren't you distressed and disappointed about that? Aren't you distressed and disappointed when you reflect on how Bigger Biggs and his multi-million-dollar business has been destroyed and left in ruins? Does your conscience not prick you when you see how that man has been deliberately and systematically ruined and lynched economically? Aren't you distressed and disappointed knowing that the party and the government that you support confiscate people's lands without adequately compensating them? Would you be happy if that happens to you? Aren't you disappointed and distressed knowing that they place very little effort in maintaining a once thriving agricultural industry? You might be a farmer yourself. How do you feel knowing that you were once independent, but now all of that independence has been sapped away from you? Aren't you distressed and disappointed? And how do you feel knowing that predial larceny is wreaking havoc throughout the country, where the produce and livestock of farmers are being stolen, leaving farmers frustrated and out of bread? Aren't you distressed and disappointed knowing that the people of North Leeward, Richmond and surrounding areas in particular, have been totally disrespected and their lands taken away from them and their crops destroyed without their knowledge, so that a St. Lucian company can put a quarry there? Aren't you distressed and disappointed when you realize that they lied to the nation and told everyone that an environmental and social impact study was done for that project, when in fact none was done? Aren't you distressed and disappointed knowing that it is the party which you support which is responsible for destroying the livelihood of those involved in catching treachery in that area? Aren't you distressed and disappointed that the beauty and splendor of the Richmond area will be destroyed? Aren't you distressed and disappointed with the basic lack of healthcare in the country? Aren't you distressed and disappointed knowing that you have no other choice but to settle for the substandard healthcare that's on offer, while those who rule you fly out at will to have their health looked after in another country? Does that not distress and disappoint you? Weren't you distressed and disappointed when you heard the Prime Minister confessed that there is extreme poverty in St Vincent and the Grenadines? Aren't you distressed and disappointed, especially when not long before his theatrical confession, he bluntly and vociferously denied that there is poverty in the country? Aren't you distressed and disappointed that the government and party you support has added significantly to the unemployment numbers in the country by sacking hundreds of teachers, police officers, nurses, customs officers, sanitation workers, and other public servants? Does that not distress and disappoint you? Aren't you distressed and disappointed knowing that those workers who were sacked, that they were sacked for having not taken the COVID-19 vaccine because of their beliefs? Think about this. What if your job was taken away from you for your belief? Would you be distressed and disappointed? Aren't you distressed and disappointed with the knowledge that every effort is being made to foist a dynasty upon the people of St Vincent and the Grenadines, where every effort is being made to pass power from father to son? Do you not think that every Vincentian deserves an equal chance to progress in the country? Do you not deserve a chance? Aren't you distressed and disappointed that such is not the case in St Vincent and the Grenadines? We, here on A View from the Outside, can definitely go on and list more of the things by which you, quite rightly, could be distressed and disappointed about. However, we do not have the luxury of time. And so, here is where we leave you to carry on the conversation and ask yourselves the question. Speak to yourself and ask yourself, am I distressed and disappointed by the many scandals and atrocities attributed to my party and government? Ask yourself that question. And if the answer is yes, or even partly yes, then do something about it. Do what is right for yourself and the nation, St Vincent and the Grenadines. Until next week, Justin and all the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with A View from the Outside, with a reminder to send your feedback as usual to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. We also invite you to visit and like our Facebook page at A View from the Outside. and also to visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel at JMB Horne. Justin, you and all the listeners have a pleasant Saturday, have a wonderful Sunday, and a productive week ahead. And ask yourselves the question, am I disappointed with the party and government in St Vincent and the Grenadines?